You are now live.
Thank you, Aisha. I always have to wait for that bit. You are now live, so I can jump in. So welcome everyone to FBS Chat. Our special guest tonight is Chris Ward. Thank you, Chris, for spending this time with us. And my brilliant co-host, Guy Shannon. Thank you, Guy, for joining us this evening. I genuinely don't know anything about you, Chris, and that's not me being, flippant. I like to know as little as possible about the people that I'm talking to because it means I'm remain curious. So, first thing, how did you first come across the solution focused approach, and what difference did it make for you?
Right. How long have we got for this?
Oh, an hour, Chris.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And we want more than one answer. We want
Yeah,
more than one answer. Okay. How did I first come across solution? Right. So where I work, there's a team of counsellors and a team of advisors, and I'm one of the advisors. And the counselling team were trying out all sorts of different approaches. They like to try new things and stuff. They're just constantly looking for what's a good way of doing stuff. So the head counsellor heard about solution focus from somewhere. And so they got in touch with Brief and invited them to introduce them to the approach. And so I heard that they were going to do that. I didn't know anything about solution focus. I've never heard of it. I assumed it meant basically so this is another aspect of this, right, is that I've always had a bit of an aversion to giving advice, even though my job title is advisor, but it's actually broader. It's just it's a job title. I do all sorts of stuff, but I'd always had this thing about like people inherently have answers. It's kind of like I was already clued into that idea that the answers are within people. So when I heard the counsellors were going to try out this thing called solution focused, I thought that meant they're going to be doing something where you kind of look at, or you kind of tell people the solution to their problems, and it was going to be kind of advice giving and all that. So I was curious and kind of thinking, oh no, at the same time. And then, so the advice team, we all sort of said to each other, it's quite often what we do with these things, is like, oh, the counselling team are going to be doing this new thing. It'd be good for at least one of us to go along and find out what it is that they're going to be doing. So that I think the thinking behind that was so that we would know when to refer someone for this thing. So it's like if there's someone in the team, or if they're trained in CBT, then when I meet a client for the first time, then I would make a judgment about, oh well, yeah, this is someone who could probably benefit from CBT, so I'll send them to the counsellors that do CBT. It's kind of like that. So we thought, we'll find out about solution focus, so we'll know who are the people that we're going to send to the people who are doing solution focus. So that was kind of like that. This is a few years ago. That was kind of like the setup, and that was like the thinking. So I joined the counselling team for the 2-day training that Evan was doing, Evan George. And then so cut a long story shortish. So basically what happened was the counselling team's kind of reaction to it was, yeah, well, this is all right, might be able to use some of this like in an intricate way. It kind of, it wasn't earth-shattering. Where I was just completely blown away with it and going, oh my God, I don't want to do anything else now. This is what I'm going to do. And a bit mystified as to why no one else was kind of reacting the same way, particularly. They were to some extent. They liked it, but they weren't completely bowled over in the way that I was. So it's kind of like, so it was an accident. It's like a happy accident. And yeah, the rest is history, which I'll tell you about in a minute, but go on.
Well, can I come in there, Chris? So what?
Yeah, go on.
Why do you think that was then? So that what was it about you, maybe, or how come you really grabbed it when some other people there didn't in the same way?
Yeah, I know. Well, that's something I've asked myself. It's something I've talked to colleagues about. It's something that I've taught quite a few. I'm in touch with people in the SF community quite regularly. and it's something that I talk about with them quite a lot as well. It's something that people talk about. It's kind of like, so how did you first, well, like we're doing now, how did you first come across it? What was it? And I haven't really got, I think it's a combination of things, but I think what you just said, I think is part of it. It was about me. And I think the only reason why I kind of logically have come to that conclusion is because otherwise it would have been everyone in the room. So it has to be something about the person on the receiving end somehow. I don't know. And it's also, you know, I mean, for one thing, it was kind of like I say, I was expecting this to be, oh, we're going to tell people solutions, and it turned out to be, you know, just about kind of accepting people as they are and kind of recognizing their strengths and all that kind of stuff, which is kind of where I'd always come from anyway. So it was a very pleasant surprise. I thought, oh, right, I'd gone in there expecting to kind of endure 2 days of someone talking about something which doesn't fit with my kind of worldview. And actually it turned out that here's someone who is talking, who's got the world view that I've got, which I didn't think anyone else particularly had. Or, you know, apart from like a select few people that I'd met along the way. So yeah, so largely that. So it kind of it's what we call the stance, isn't it? That sort of attitude. The stance, kind of like the thinking, the way that you think about people and the way you talk to people and all that kind of stuff, was just something I recognised, and I thought it was just me, pretty much. So there was that. And what else? Yeah, and also I think, to be honest, it was kind of, I was at a bit of a crossroads in my career at that point. I was kind of very ready for something new as well. It was getting to a point where, you know, I wasn't going to like change career or even leave my job, but I was sort of thinking, you know, this isn't quite doing it for me. Something needs to change here. So I was at that stage. So something else came along. It's that thing of, you know, they do something different. That if it's working, do more of it. If it's not, do something different. So I was kind of in that point where it wasn't quite working. So I wanted to do something different. And solution focus was something different that I could do. And then what's more, it kind of really fitted with who I was. So it was like perfect. So yeah, it was very, I don't know, it was serendipity.
And just for, because obviously we have people watching that have little or no experience with solution focus, and really, as we're talking, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, so you had a team of counsellors, you were one of the advisors. What was your actual role? What were you providing as a service?
That's another long one, but yeah, okay. So as a service, it's right. So we're based at the University of Surrey, and it's a wellbeing service at university. So I'm a mental health nurse. We've got social workers, we've got occupational therapists, and we've got a load of counsellors. So it's like a collection of people who work in mental health in all sorts of different ways, using different approaches and all that kind of stuff. And that's always been the case. Now, let me see. So where I was brought in originally, it was kind of partly health promotion role, joining a team that are doing the health promotion. It's been divided like the advice team, which is why, I mean, that's largely why it's called advice. It's doing health promotion, and the counsellors do the counselling, but then also the advice team will meet people. And I think we would have talked in vague terms. It's kind of evolved since, but at that time we would have been talking quite sort of vague terms about kind of doing the more practical stuff, the more kind of stuff about lifestyle and all that kind of thing. Yeah, kind of talking with people about that rather than counselling, you know what I mean? I mean, there's always an overlap with these things, but so that was it. So it's kind of, so the remit is, yeah, so it includes some advice, some health promotion, some health education, and support. And it was kind of seen as like practical support, sort of liaising with people, setting things up, you know, something, the kind of stuff that's kind of sort of evolved into social prescribing nowadays, kind of along those lines. So that was part of it. But also a big part of what I did within the team personally, which I still do now actually, is part of my speciality, if you like, is working with the people who are identified as kind of like the most severe end. It's kind of like I'm doing lots of this because I talk about mental health. I'm very aware that I'm kind of talking about a paradigm that I don't particularly subscribe to myself, but I work within it, kind of thing. So I do a lot of that, and so it's the severe and enduring mental health issues. Kind of people who've been identified or kind of put in that categorization would come my way, kind of thing, and then I would work with them. And a lot of the time, I would just basically just have a chat with them, because these are people who've kind of been identified as people who can't use counselling, or they try counselling, hasn't worked for them.
Right.
They're quite often sort of dissatisfied, or also just not really getting an awful lot from the kind of medical intervention and the kind of medical psychological stuff that the NHS provides. But they need to, but they're still struggling. They need to get through university. And they're working in university ultimately, to help people through university. So it is kind of in my mind. This is obviously before like coming across SF and all that kind of thing. Although this is still the case. Having said that, it's basically there's not a lot of point in me trying to be a counsellor. There's no point in doing like traditional counselling because that doesn't work. Not really a lot of point in telling them to take medication if they don't want to, or particularly giving them much education about medication if they do want to, or if they just have questions for that. I can answer some of that stuff, but really the prescriber is a better place than pharmacists and people like that. Better place. There's not a lot of point in spending too much time going into too much detail about that. In terms of like the lifestyle thing, I've never been one to tell someone how to live their life, but I'm happy to have a conversation about their lifestyle. So it really what I used to do is just meet with people as much as they want to meet with me, if they think it's useful. Just have the odd appointment ad hoc, or have like a regular thing if that's what I prefer, just to have a chat, and hopefully it will kind of help them through. It's just kind of it is someone who they can talk with, who isn't going to freak out when they're talking about hearing voices or having thoughts of killing themselves and stuff like that. Someone who's kind of used to conversing about that kind of stuff, so they can just meet and talk candidly and openly, and we'll just have a chat. And I mean, actually, probably one of the best ways to describe my role came from a client years ago, and he said to me, and I think actually, right again, this is before coming across SF. I remember having a conversation with him about just checking in with him about is this really useful? Because I don't want to be wasting your time. I think it started with him saying to me, you see me like every week. Oh, don't mind my phone, someone will get out of it. So he'd said something to me about like wasting my time, and I hope I'm not wasting time. We meet up every week and we chat. And I was saying, well, no, I said, to be completely honest, I'm getting paid whatever I do. I get the same. So you're not actually wasting my time. It's not really possible. The thing that's important to me is that I'm not wasting your time. So we got into that, and he said, well, I have found it really useful, but I don't know why particularly, because all we do is have a chat. And the way he put it is, he said it's just like I come and talk to my Uncle Chris every week, and it helps. It gets me through, and that was it. And I thought that was a really nice bit of feedback. So maybe that's what I should put. Maybe that's what we should put in the description of the job. Is like Uncle Chris. I'm just like Uncle.
That's how it was before you did the SF training.
Yeah. And then the SF is just a way of taking that and then extracting the real nuggets of gold. That it's kind of, having discovered SF, I've got a better understanding of why those chats had been useful when they had, I think. So I've been able to kind of, just really zone in on those. And now there's more of a kind of, there's more of a kind of intention in what I'm doing in a way. You see what I mean? It's kind of, it's more, I wouldn't say structured, because I'm not so into like the techniques in that sense so much, but certainly in terms of having a clear sense of, kind of the whole thing of kind of basically working out, okay, so what is it you want to get out of this, and then how will you know when you're starting to, and like having that in mind, it just gives it more of a kind of framework. It's a bit less hit and miss. It's more, it's basically like a distilled version of what I was always doing, which is for me, which is a really nice thing, because for me that's like a parallel to how SF came about in the first place. That's what the guys in the family therapy center in America were doing. That was exactly that, was looking at their therapy and trying to extract the effective bit and then just do more of that. And then sure enough, they found, okay, so if we concentrate on doing these aspects of our conversation, then people report more effectiveness. So let's just try and like discipline ourselves to do that more. And it's basically the same thing. That's kind of what I've ended up doing with it as well.
It sounds like a very sort of fortunate sort of meeting, you and Solution Focused, and it sounds like the way you'd set up your context for working was just the perfect context for Solution Focused to arrive into. So I was thinking of Solution Focused as being a creature wandering around looking for the best context.
Well, it's like it's what I said about football teams, isn't it? It's like, right, so I support Southampton.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris.
And so I'm one of these people who I never say I chose to support Southampton. Southampton chose me to be their supporter.
Shall I get rid of him?
Well, I'm wavering. I'm wavering a bit.
Definitely better, but it's probably even worse. Well, I don't know. But I mean, well, insert name of football team here. But it's like a cliche that people say, isn't it? It's like, oh, I was chosen by West Ham. I was chosen by Chelsea, or Tottenham, or Arsenal, even Southampton, but not Portsmouth. That's completely different.
Oh, no, Portsmouth.
Very different way. I think it works in like the underworld and stuff like that.
Well, Chris, so do you think? Do you think your employers could be watching this at the moment? Because you described getting employed to do advice, promotion, and education, and you don't do it, so you do something else instead. Is it all okay with?
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, it is all okay, and I do it. Is like the short answer. And so yeah, early on, after discovering SF, because I was just so. I mean, I'm still enthused about it now, but I was very enthused at the start, shouting like from the rooftops about it. So I was, so I was very vocal about the fact that I was doing this and it's great. And so there was a moment where my employer, line manager, had said to me, people were starting to say, I never really found out, just like what people were saying. People are starting to say that you seem to just be doing solution-focused therapy. And where your job description's got all of this stuff in it. So we had a chat about it, and basically, right, so there was two things. So one thing I said, okay, well, I'm not doing solution-focused therapy. As far as I'm concerned, I think there's a distinction. I'm doing solution-focused practice, for one thing, and that's a whole nother tangent we could go on, difference between solution-focused therapy and solution-focused practice, but I would say I'm solution-focused practice. So there was that, and then, so the other thing was, I said, okay, so now, right, so if we look at my job description and where it's kind of saying it involves doing this, those things are strategies in order to achieve something, right? And the thing that I'm really employed to do is to achieve that something, which is kind of, which is, like I say, ultimately it's about providing support, particularly for the kind of the most struggling students in the university, more than anything else. And getting them through successfully, getting them, through their degree program and all that kind of stuff. So this is what I was saying, is that, okay, so what I'm doing now, yes, what I'm doing now differs from what I was doing before, if you were to go by the letter of it, but I'm still achieving the same thing, all right? So I'm going about it in a different way. I'm not using those strategies, but I'm achieving the outcome. And what's more, and I'd actually kind of thought ahead with this and kept some metrics, I kept data, so I had demonstrable kind of statistics to show how effective I was being in my work, and it went through the roof. I was much more effective than I was before. So in the end, they just sort of said, fine, yeah, that's okay. You're still ticking all the boxes. And I mean, I'll still do things. I'll still do health promotion events, but I'll do them in a solution focused way. And yeah, I mean, where someone comes for advice. So I mean, that's a classic thing in solution focus. Well, I was going to say which we're all familiar with, but as people on the call might say who aren't so familiar with SF, but it's a very common thing in SF that someone books a session because they're looking for advice on the face of it. And they'll so you'll say what your best hopes. Am I talking? I'd like some advice about this, that, or the other. So then what we'll go straight into is kind of, okay, so if I was giving you that advice, how would you know that it had been useful? Kind of, what are you hoping to do with it? What you're hoping to achieve, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, and then to cut a long story short with that, you end up with a happy customer at the end of the conversation, basically. So you achieve the same outcome in a different way. So it's fine. So it is still fine for me to be called an advisor. It doesn't really matter to me what the job title is. If someone comes to see me for whatever reason, looking for something, I can help them with that. So it's all compatible. It can seem confusing at the outset from the outside in a way, but it's worked out very well.
And going back to, our team were trained by Harvey as well, funnily enough, and we've got that in common. And some members of the team felt, this is ridiculous. This could never work. What the hell is he on about? That was I felt I've come home. This sounds just like wow. And I know you said earlier that even when you were an advisor before the training, that you felt that the answers were definitely within people, within the person that you were talking to, and that's kind of one of the main assumptions of that approach, is the client is the expert. What else blew you away on those 2 days? What else resonated with you?
Yeah, right. Well, let me see. Right, as a very broad thing, the fact that so for me, what was being demonstrated to me in the videos and in the exercises and what we were discussing was kind of like, for me, it was just basically like the real core of mental health nursing. It kind of came across. It's like I say, this is only from my perspective as a mental health nurse, having worked for years and years in mental health nurse. And I was kind of in the camp as a mental health nurse when I was working in hospitals and stuff, where I'd be saying like, yeah, I mean, the medication, the containing environment, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's part of what we do. But the thing that's really the real magic in what we do is what happens when you play a game of pool with a patient. You're a nurse, they're a patient, and then you have a game of pool on the pool table. I don't know, because I haven't been in a mental hospital for years now. So, but it used to be one of the features of an acute ward. You had to have a pool table. It wasn't a mental health ward if you didn't have a pool table in there. Right. So no, honestly, and a smoking room, but I know those have gone as well. But and that's where the real work happened. And I was a real believer in that. It's when you're playing pool together with someone, and you're just two human beings playing pool, and you have a bit of a connection. You talk about stuff, and you just kind of both experience a bit of normality, and that helps. All right, and that's the real magic. That's the essence of mental health nursing for me. And then if you were to talk about what happens in a solution focused session, it's basically the same thing, but instead of being on a pool table, it's done in a conversational way. But it's a similar kind of thing. So there was that, and it was kind of, so I'd always I was a bit like, when I did my training, I spent 3 years all the way through the training, and I used to say it all the time, like out loud in classes and stuff and everything. So it wasn't like something I was keeping to myself. It was like thing, and I still hold true to it. I still think it's true now. Well, all the way through, I was saying, all right, well, this is basically a load of nonsense, but it's kind of something we need to do to get the qualification to go and do the job, and then that's when you actually be doing something useful. when I was out on placement, it was all about kind of, I'll learn this stuff, I'll learn the name of the drugs, I'll learn all these things, all the procedures and and all that stuff. So I learn it all because it's part of the job, but it's not really what we're all here for. That's not really the thing. You know what I mean? So I say it all the way through, and I always held on to that, and I've always thought it's very true. It's kind of so yeah, I don't know how else to put it really, but it's kind of it just solution focus was kind of the same kind of attitude, same mindset, because that is inherent in solution focus. I recognise that blew me away. But then the other thing is that what really did it for me, what really made me sit and take notice was as Evan, right at the beginning of the first day, the way he opened it was, we kind of said, thanks for, inviting me to do all of this. I'm going to talk about solution focus approach. I think was what the word he used. And so what he said about it was, he said something like, I first came across solution focus in whatever it is, I don't know, 89, 90, whatever year it was, and I've been in love with it ever since, is what he said. And that really made me sit up and take notice, because I hadn't ever heard anyone talk about what I thought was just a therapeutic approach as something they've fallen in love with. I thought that was weird. I thought right, so either he's weird or like there's something kind of it, but it's weird anyway, but in a really good way. It was kind of so it really kind of grabbed me, that, and I thought, and it kind of reminded me, right, so I mean how I became a mental health nurse was I'd done the same thing. I mean I'd kind of fallen in love with that activity, if you like. So that really resonated with me when you said that. But for me, what it was this is in the blog, by the way, so so I won't go on about too much. You can read about it. But but basically, so about, I don't know, 30 years ago, something like that. What is it, 2021? Over 30 years ago now. I was unemployed for about 2 years, and I started doing voluntary work. Because I was just going out my mind otherwise, and I ended up volunteering to work in a mental health day centre, not knowing anything about mental health, being a little bit apprehensive about what environment I was going into here and all that kind of thing. But I just wanted to do something, and all I needed to do was make tea and toasted sandwiches for people, have a chat with them. And I thought, well, I can do that, So I did that as a volunteer, and met all these amazing people who were coming to have a cup of tea and cheese toasty, chatting with them. And one thing in particular, I still remember the first time I met someone, they told me they were schizophrenic. And the thing that grabbed me, and I'm sure I said it at the time, is kind of, but you don't seem any different to me or anyone else that I know. That's, And it's kind of, you might experience some things in that, but everyone experiences different things and all that kind of stuff. It's just a human being. We're having a game of chess and drinking tea. And it's very nice. And that, and it was that thing of just hanging around with people, and particularly with people. I mean, people who've been through the mental health system in a way that people don't quite so much these days. Actually, we used to have a lot of properly institutionalized people who've really been through that system, have very interesting stories to tell. They've been through a lot, so they're just interesting people to talk to on the whole. And that's what I fell in love with. Just, it's like, well, this is a great way to spend my time. I can actually get paid for doing this. So that's it. So I just wanted to do more of that. And it's like I say, I went to this training, learned all this stuff, thinking, all right, but it's what's really good is sitting and chatting with people about their lives.
So, Chris, how long did you work in a mental health day centre for?
Let me see. Well, about a year, because that was just like as a volunteer. Within a few weeks of starting working there, I thought, okay, how might I be able to do this and get paid for it? And I can actually get like a job in this. Before that I was a landscape gardener, and then one thing led to another. There was a recession on all that kind of stuff, and I didn't have any work for a couple of years. So the last thing I would have thought of doing was being being a mental health nurse. So I would have said I want to do something creative at that time. That's what I would say, which I do. But yeah, so it was kind of, yeah, and then I was just looking around. I tried applying for some jobs. There's actually, I mean, it was a joint venture between social services and Mind, a mental health charity. So actually what I was thinking about was social work. I was kind of thinking, how can I get to be a social worker? And I tried getting jobs like in residential care homes and that kind of thing, and got in the situation where it's like catch-22, where you need qualifications to get a job. If you haven't got the qualifications, you need the experience, and you can't get the experience unless you've got the job. So you're like in a vicious circle. So you need a qualification. And then, all right, this is going to sound a bit weird, and I hope this isn't going to be offensive to anyone watching. But like, it's genuine truth. This is how it worked. With it's kind of, all right. So to do this kind of work, it strikes me there's two career paths. There's social work or mental health nurse. And what it came down to, honestly, is just, I thought to myself, when I go down the pub in the evening and people say, what do you do for a living? If I say I'm a social worker, they're going to say, I'm going to take my children away. But that's going to be the end of the conversation. I'm going to settle my own in the pub. Whereas if I say I'm a mental health nurse, it will be, oh, you're a very special person. Or, it's kind of...
Well, Chris, just...
It was going to go down there. That's why I went for mental health nurse.
Well, I had a very similar route here. Right. I made the other choice, but I worked in a day centre run by Mind for a year. And then I ended up going through, and nobody in a pub ever said, you're going to take my children away. But
no, well, it wasn't based on any kind of reality. It was just what I thought in my, like, whatever, 21-year-old head at the time. Yeah.
Do you think that so you worked as a volunteer in this day centre, and describing the mental health nurse training, it sounded a bit like you were sort of waiting for that training to finish so that you could get the qualification to do the work. I mean, how influential was, you started to describe it in such a way that it sounded it was quite influential on you becoming a solution-focused practitioner, your experience in that day centre.
Yeah.
Back then.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was for me, I think, looking back in a way that I've realised more and more as I've reflected on the sort of journey I took, that way back in the mid-80s, working as a very young person in a mental health day centre, where roles were very sort of, this comment about, well, you don't seem any different than me, which is quite a sort of innocent sort of comment in a way. But I felt the same, and I'm not sure how much I brought that with me into that day centre, or whether working there helped to shape me in those ways, and sort of seeing people as equal, or that sort of democratic. Solution focus is a democratic approach.
Yeah,
it's in various senses. So I was just interested in any more you wanted to say about the influence of being in that that mental health day centre and that milieu and that.
Yeah, it's a good point. That is a good point. And I hadn't particularly thought about it in that way and in that much depth. I just know that it was a great gig, basically. It was just, for me, it was like, yeah, this is great, because it's like, going in as the person off the street is the thing. So there is something about day centres where they're largely staffed by volunteers, so without the training and all that kind of thing. And there is this thing in solution focus, isn't there, that we all talk about, that quite often people, when they're introduced to the approach, have a lot of like unlearning to do. So there's kind of an advantage going into working, in a field where you're helping people who've been disadvantaged by their circumstances, and if you're going into it without that stuff to unlearn, then you're at an advantage. And so there is that. So wonderful things happen in day centres as a result, because people are. It's like, in the absence of having all of that stuff, you're just going to treat them like anyone else. Because what else are you going to do? You don't know to do anything different. And as a result, great things happen in those places. So I do think, there is something in it, and I really I consciously wanted to hold on to that, and have ever since as well. And I've kind of tried to sort of stay true to the person who discovered that. The revelation there was kind of, I thought I was volunteering to make tea and sandwiches. It could have been anything. It could have been in a cafe or anything else. But it happened to be in a mental health day centre, right? And I kind of knew, well, I sort of knew, but I had this idea that that's going to be a risky place to go and do that, right? Because we're talking like, you know, late 80s. So it was kind of, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you know, the headlines were still going around about schizophrenic stabs mum on tube train and all that kind of stuff, like in droves. That was the real, you know, things have moved on a bit, but, you know, we talk about stigma nowadays, but it was a lot worse then in that sense. So it's kind of is somewhere that anyone would kind of regard as like a risky place to go and work. And the big revelation when I got there is that all these people who are supposedly the people who no one else wants to work because they're a bit risky to be around, just the same as anyone else. It's like you might as well be working in a pub or something. In fact, it's probably a much safer environment than a pub on the whole. And I remember saying that to people at the time. Actually, that's another. So not everyone's scared of going into a mental health unit, but no one's bothered about going into a pub where, you know, and particularly like where I grew up, you knew for a fact there was going to be a fight at the end of the night. People were going to get hurt on a Friday night. That was a given. But that wasn't seen as like too risky place to go into, and there's people in there that are dangerous. You know what I mean?
And I guess as a volunteer, you're coming from that almost, it's not even ignorant, but not knowing. And maybe asking questions that people may have said, no, don't ask that, Chris, because you don't know what's going to happen. But it kind of, it almost, from what the sense I get from you, because often when we were trained initially, it was almost like, I've got to ask this question and I've got to follow on with this and I've got to follow on with that. Whereas with you, it just sounds like it's almost like a natural conversation, but there will be elements of the SF coming in at some point. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't seem as structured. It just seems like a natural flow.
Yeah. Well, that's, yeah, I mean, I haven't been able to do the thing that a lot of people do where you video yourself and like micro analysis. Because, yeah, like, you know, I did have a go, but the university have got really tight data protection and all this kind of stuff, regulations. So I was going to do it at one point. I was going up to call sessions and I wanted to come up with the disclaimer form, whatever it's called, like the permission form that people sign to say they're happy for this to be videoed, and then it will be kept and it will be used for training purposes and all that. And I had to go to the legal team at the university, and then their suggested form that came back was 3 pages long, and it was small print as well. So it was, and I just thought, well, ethically, I can't give that to someone to sign at the start, so or even like a week before the session, to be honest, because, you know, there's too much stuff there to really get your head around what it is that you're signing up to. So I just thought, no, I can't really do that. So I don't do that. But if I did, if it was videoed, then yeah, I think like as objective as I can be about it, I think that's how it would look. Where I'm quite aware quite often that I go a bit off piste, and I'm not doing the stuff that you see in the textbooks or that, you know, we kind of talk about. I do go a bit off piste, but the stance is the same, and that's the thing for me. It's not the techniques. I kind of, you know, I'm aware of things, and there's things I'll kind of. I'm a big fan of scaling. I do like scaling, so I'll kind of use that in my conversations where it fits and all that kind of thing. But there's a lot of problem. Probably how it would look is a lot of problem-free talk, right? Problem-free talk. And then I'll kind of like remember myself and go, oh yeah, so anyway, about that, about my waking up tomorrow. So yeah, so how would you be holding the knife differently as you spread them arm and stuff like that?
I'm very interested to hear about your creative side, Chris, and I know Guy would be very interested. I'm actually going to attempt to share something with your permission. I'm going to attempt it. If it doesn't work, guys. If it doesn't work, guys, then
you've got a picture I drew when I was 5 or something. It's like, this is your life. No,
that's exactly the one.
Yeah.
Right.
Ooh.
Oh, where should we go, Guy?
Oh, I don't know. Press start. Press play.
Yeah, which one? Which one, Guy? You choose.
The top one. That one. No. The other one. Well, the bottom one then. Why is the nose sticking out of your mask?
Oh, that one. What
Yeah.
Chris was doing during lockdown.
That's the latest one. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, that doesn't sound great.
Doesn't sound great in here, right?
No.
You can't hear it.
But but the link's at the bottom of the screen, isn't it?
Yeah. I just. Well, it's
For anyone watching, you can follow that
I'm
link.
going to put it.
Chris Ward SF Music.
But hang on, Chris, it's a bit of punk rock, isn't it? So that sound might be more authentic than the actual recording, as I heard.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Yeah, towards the end of the evening.
I've put it there. But talk to us a little bit about your music. What inspires you? Why'd you do it? What's going on? Educate me.
We've got about a quarter of an hour now. That's the other. I mean, I could probably talk more about music than I can about SF, to be honest. So that'll be invite me back another day and I'll do that. But I don't know. I grew up in Andover, in the middle of Hampshire, which it's like a new town. It wasn't. It used to be like a little market town, and it was the home of the Trogs. You know the Trogs?
Yeah.
Who did Wild Thing.
Mm-hmm. I've met the right.
And what was the other, the wet song? They wrote that. Love Is All Around. They did the original of that. Yes, the wet one's a cover, but the real classic song anyway. The big one, Wild Thing.
I want to be an expert.
Anyway. All right, and there's this so there's this little town. It started out, it was like a little market town, and then so when would it have been? Like in the 70s, the GLC had this policy of rehousing people in big estates in London to new towns. So they built 4 great big council estates and a couple of industrial estates in Andover and moved all these people mostly from North London. So it was kind of like a little bit of like London and like a rough bit in the middle of beautiful countryside. And the thing that they kind of didn't get round to, at least in the time I lived there, I haven't been back for years. Maybe it's brilliant now, I don't know. But there wasn't really much in the way of entertainment. There was like a handful of pubs. There was one nightclub where they had a very strict door policy. And that was it. And lots of people just living in council estates and quite a lot of unemployment and really underperforming schools and that kind of thing. So it was one of those things where you really make up your own entertainment. And so me and my group of friends, growing up in this town, like a lot of teenagers in a lot of towns, kind of going, what are we going to do with ourselves? What are we going to do with our time? We're going out of our minds. And being aware that this is the town where the Trogs came from. And also like growing up in the 70s, sort of late 70s with punk coming around. And that sound, like Wild Thing, was quite a punk song, like years ahead of its time and all that kind of stuff, in a way. So it was kind of that. That's what we all did. It's what me and my friends all did, pass the time. Was get into music and like pick up instruments, form bands, and play lots of music. And so yeah, guitar was my thing, particularly then the drums a bit later on, but guitar really still is. And so yeah, so basically what happened is there's a few. I think we all thought, well, we'll just end up being big rock stars one day. That's the answer. And I'm not going to name drop because it's vulgar and it's not. Well, I'll do it in private. But
tell us after.
But one or two, did. Like some of my friends, quite a few actually managed to just make a living out of it, and one or two were really well known.
Tell us.
No, another day. So yeah, and so right, in my case, it was all well and good, and I was all right as well at what I was doing, but I was just terrified of doing it in front of people. So for me at that time, it just kind of ruled it out. I thought, well, I'm not gonna join. So I'd like jam with all my friends, and they'd say, "Oh, you got to join our band. We're going to play a gig in the pub and all this kind of stuff." And I go, "No, I'll draw the line there. It's like, yeah, I'm happy to do this here, but I'm not going to go and do it in front of people on the stage or anything. That's just no. That's all right, thanks." So yeah, so I never really pursued it and ended up going into other things, and then yeah, so it was never a thing. And then so then through SF, I'm going to cut out a lot of this because we're pushed for time, but basically, yeah, it's through the SF community and particularly the conference, UK ASFP conference, where they have, you have the what's it called, the cabaret thing, surprise cabaret. So it's that kind of reminded me that like years later, I there was a fork in the road, and I could have gone into music, and I went the other way. But I've still got all the skills, the talents, the potential, and so I could kind of have a little bit of like, what would it have been like if I'd gone down that fork in the road at a conference? So I got myself. So having not had a guitar for about 20 years, because I've been busy bringing up kids and all that kind of stuff, and not really thinking about it, not really into music, listening to music, talking about music, hanging around with musicians, all that stuff, but not actually sort of playing or anything. So that made me think, I'm going to get myself a guitar, and like next conference, I'll do some songs on the stage, and that's what I did. And it's just and it's grown from there. And then I discovered that actually nowadays you can have a recording studio for about, I think I spent about 300 quid or something. It's like, technology's there, you can just do it in your dining room in my case. So I thought, I'll do that then as well. I'll just do that in my spare time and see where that goes. And it's doing all right. I've had like 2 songs played on BBC Surrey. They did, the last 2. Well, like I say, Hurry on Sundown. That was the Hawkwind cover. I sent it. I'd done it. I thought, this is all right. I'm going to send it to Hawkwind, because the Hawkwind community is like that. And they said, this is great. We're going to share it on our official Facebook page to all of the Hawkwind fans in there, several thousand people and all that. So that got on there, and then so that gave me a shot in the arm. And then Collared Dove is the first song that I've written myself, and that got played on BBC Surrey, which is just around the corner from where I live. And then they interviewed me, and then I did, and then the next one, the one you just tried to play that sounded a bit weird.
That one.
Why is your nose sticking out of your mouth? That's been on BBC Radio Surrey as well.
I love that one. I know. I didn't like you for days because all I kept singing was that song.
That was kind of the idea of it.
It was such a catchy tune.
Yeah.
So Chris, how does it connect with your solution focused work, would you say? Playing music, writing music, or?
Well, the short answer is that it's all art. I would say. I went to art college as well before all of this. In the midst of all of that, before I worked in the day centre, I've spent a year at Winchester Art College, which is another hotbed. Well, obviously, I was going to say that's like a hotbed for creative people, but of course it's an art college. So but it is for music, as a lot of people don't necessarily realise this, but it is for music as much as visual arts. So I've been in that environment, and solution focus is absolutely an art form. It's or a craft is another way of it, but it fits with that. It's a creative way of talking and thinking and being. It is creative. It's art. I think of it as an art form, and in fact, that was another thing that Evan had said. That was at a training that I went to after we'd done the thing at work. I went and did like a proper full-day training, brief, and Evan took that. And towards the end of it, he was kind of musing, I think, about kind of how really do we define this, because it's more than a therapy, and and people talk about it as solution focused practice or the solution focused approach, all that kind of, and it's it's got applications nowadays in the business world and politics and all that kind of thing. It's, coaching all over the place. And so this is what Evan came up with. He said so I think one way of describing it is that it's kind of like a form of improvised performance art. And I'm completely on board with that idea. I think that's absolutely it. For me, I would say that's quite a good, accurate description of what SF is. So it's art, so it's all creative, so it all ties in.
Joe, you sound lovely, really lovely.
I was just just followed on from what Chris was saying about performance art, is that we may have, we don't know it, because every client's so individual. We don't know the answer to the questions we're going to ask. So sometimes it is like having that performance, we don't know where it's going.
Isn't it?
Necessarily.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't work if you did. It's very important that you don't know where it's going, which is kind of how I live my life actually as well. So so it fits for me. So I mean, maybe that's another thing, like the thing you were saying at the beginning, Guy, about what was it about you when you first came across this that you thought this fit? And there's something about that. I like that kind of anything can happen sort of position in life generally. I prefer not to kind of, I'm very aware of, like, even if I'm making plans for what I might do in the next week or two, I'm very aware that anything can change at any moment because of, like, various sort of life experiences and stuff like that. I think besides anything else, I'm very aware that everything can change in a heartbeat. Everything can be completely different. So you kind of make plans, and you can make a plan B. But the thing is, if you're going to kind of live that way, you would need to make plan C, plan D, plan E, plan F, because there's too many possibilities. So you're better off just going, anything can happen. Let's just go with that.
So is that the way you approach each of your sessions, Chris? It's just So as well as music, you've got this great blog, which I can see going along the bottom here, keepcalmandsolutionfocused.com. And that's what a blog post you wrote about ending sessions, which I really liked.
Thanks.
And it's about how you, because I've been thinking about it a lot recently, one or two experiences I've had about what to say at the end of a session and how much to, whether to trying to strike a balance between allowing the person to think it's okay to arrange another session, that they aren't wasting my time. That thing you said at the beginning, that some people worry that they're wasting your time. Say that it's okay to see me again, but I want to it's okay not to see me again. It's all, and it's what words to actually say to, and what you wrote about it I really liked, because you really got into that about, but so offering optimum choice and control, I suppose, to the person that the person we're working with. And there was something about something I hadn't thought about, was not calling it a follow-up session. Because follow-up suggests it's an ongoing process, as opposed to what you were just saying about anything could happen on any session. Seeing the session more self-contained than following a process, which is an interesting thought. Not discussed much, I don't think, in the solution-focused world.
No, that's right. Well, actually, but it did come up in the SFU. Like, for a very reasonable annual fee, then you can be party to these amazing things, which I can tell you all about as well. But so we did a thing. Adam Frower chaired a panel discussion about follow-up sessions, and that's what we're talking about now. That was the thing that I was saying, is it's kind of, because this is the way I see it, right? I don't know. I think probably like the simplest, like briefest way I can put it is the really like the whole idea of a follow-up or like a follow-up session is a construct at the end of the day. Because if you think about it, in effect, every time you meet someone, they're a slightly different person than last time you met them. So you're meeting them for the first time every time you meet them. So in that sense, it isn't a follow-up, because you're meeting them for the first time. So I do kind of, I probably haven't put it very well there, but I kind of think of every session as just being a moment in time where this current version of me is meeting with this current version of this person, and then we just have a conversation.
And yet the first question classically is, what's better? Which seems
I don't always go with it.
Right.
No, I mean, what's up? I've said.
What's up?
I say that when I'm working.
So what's the news? It's something I say every now and then. Because that's actually, for me, that's something I quite like, because it's quite neutral. Because you're not, I don't know. See, and now this is where there probably would be people who would say, "Oh, that's not solution focused." You want to be deliberately kind of highlighting the moments that are more linked to what people want and all that kind of stuff. So you would deliberately be saying what's been better, what's like the good news, if you like. but then at the same time, I kind of think you can trust people to sift through, and it's not an individual question. It's a process. So so by kind of just starting with something that's neutral about, so what has been happening, you're going to get stuff about the good and the bad, and then your questions then are going to be, you're going to filter out from the answer which bit you're going to focus on to talk about next. So it kind of, so in a way, it doesn't particularly matter that much what the opening thing is, and it I don't know, it can be jarring sometimes. I think if people, when you sort of say what's been better, you quite often get a thing where people will say nothing, but then that's a bit of a gift, because then you can kind of sit in silence until they've got another answer, or you can go, okay, so how have you managed to get through, in spite of that? And so you can still use it still, but there's something about, I don't know, it's kind of where I think, like, for me, I like to have an element of acknowledgement alongside the kind of the highlighting the the good stuff in a way, and I think it kind of helps. There's a thing about kind of allowing people to kind of go at their pace. I think is part of that. So it kind of safeguards against being solution forced rather than solution focused. I don't know. It's a subtle, tricky thing, but So I'll quite often say that. And then sometimes I'll be doing like a second, third, whatever, appointment with someone I've met before, and I'll start it with, okay, so what would you like to get out of our talking today? Because I still think it's always just as relevant a question at the start of the session, whether it's first, second, third, or 100th time you met them. It's kind of it still kicks you off in the right direction. So just go with that as well.
Yeah, and ask him. So what's new is very neutral. It could be, this has happened, which isn't so positive, but this has also happened. So rather than
I think that's right.
You're not limiting the client's answer, I guess. No,
that's right. Yeah, well, the thing is for me as well. It's for me, right? The solution focused bit, the bit that I'm doing, the discipline on my part, is it's about the way that I'm listening and the bits that I'm picking up on to ask about. That's all it is. So it's, I don't know, something because I've done I do a thing where, because I'm working at university, I also I join the mental health nursing teaching program, like once a year. They have a morning with me where they're training as mental health nurses, and they have a morning with me where I introduce them to the solution focused approach. And it's something that I'll kind of, that I've found myself saying in that quite a lot, is it's about this thing about it's what you're listening out for. It's a way of listening and all that kind of stuff. And it's right. So the phrase that I find myself keep coming back to is it's not the client's job to be solution focused. It's the practitioner's job to be solution focused. The client can just be whatever they want and whoever they want. That's kind of the whole point. So it's so in a way, it's like, so I think, that whatever, as long as the conversation started, I don't know. For me personally, it's probably not that important what the first thing is that you say as a practitioner. And there have been times, and I think actually in the blog I've got like a kind of a transcript. The transcripts on there are kind of like amalgams. They're kind of like, they're all things that people said, but not necessarily all one person in one blog. But so one of them, there was a thing where I think you can tell from reading the blog, or it comes across the blog, that I wasn't the first person to talk. It's like, we got in the room, sat in our chairs, and I think actually, best of my recollection, I think I was actually thinking, right, so like, how shall I phrase this? Am I going to say what's been better? Am I going to say what have you been pleased to know yourself doing? I was kind of like thinking, am I just going to say, look, I'd like to get out of this? And while I was thinking about that, we were kind of sitting in silence, and then they opened the conversation. So they said the first thing. I can't remember. If you look back through the blogs, it'll be in there. So I can't remember what it was now. But yeah, they kind of started. That's another way to do it. In a way, you could say maybe that's something I haven't tried. anyone's brave enough, maybe that's something that could be tried. Is don't say a word, just sit and wait for them to talk, and then take it from there.
I think therapists who do, isn't it? I think there's therapists who do that, Chris, but they work in a different approach. So,
okay,
so that's something we can learn from other approaches.
Yeah, potentially, yeah. I mean, it's all, it all goes. As far as I'm concerned, anything goes, as long as what you're doing is done in a way where you're being mindful to ensure that, the conversation, that the bit of the conversation which you've got influence over, through the way that you're talking, is aligned with, the kind of the description that someone is starting to give you about what they're hoping for in future. Then however you're going about that, whatever techniques you're using, as long as it's doing that, in my mind, then it's solution focused. That's kind of, so there's all sorts of ways of doing it. It's all kinds of, and in fact, I'm quite into the idea of not really teaching people. This might sound a bit controversial as well, but not all that into kind of teaching people how to do it in a way. Just say, okay, so this is your mission should you decide to accept it. But really, is kind of, hold on to this stance, hold on to these assumptions about people having everything they need, being capable of, of what they want to achieve and all that kind of stuff. And, just really hold on to that. Make sure that this is using that conversation, and then make sure that you're asking questions that fit with that point of view, that mindset. And then what you tend to find is people will start to come up with the sorts of things that we recognise as often taught examples of solution-focused questions. They do it naturally anyway. I've done that as a bit of an exercise with the nursing students, and it's been quite striking, where I've just spent, like an hour or so talking about this is the set of assumptions that I would invite you to hold dear whilst you're talking with someone, and that's basically it. And then I've had this thing, I've got like a, like, what do you call it, like a PowerPoint presentation slide with Harry Corman's stuff about, everyone is capable of achieving what they want to achieve, and they've got everything they need. And the other one that I've just forgotten is when I always do that, which is why I have it on a slide to show to people. And I just put it up and just think about that, to talk about that, and how would that look in conversation and that kind of thing, and then just get people getting groups, and then go around the room and listen to the conversation, and people will naturally say, how did you know that would work? How did you know that you could do that? What have you done in the past that's led to you, having the skills that you're talking about, and how might those be useful applied to your? And people naturally say this stuff to each other when they're when they're thinking that way. So for me, that's probably the most important bit of teaching, not so much the technique.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
That went by pretty quick. Pretty quick.
That was great, Chris. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I've learned quite a bit, and food for thought. Food for thought for me. Maybe not say follow-up session.
Well, no, you can say whatever you like.
I'm just kind of thinking. I'm just kind of thinking about it, and I think there's probably better ways that I can kind of talk about that, and maybe look at replacing those words. But yeah, I just don't think of it.
I just don't think of it. I like to. It's that not knowing thing. So I like to deliberately try and put to one side everything I think I know about this person from my previous experience with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of that. Yeah, that's me. That's what I do.
No, I think with some of our and I think with some of our clients that would work really well. So it's as long as you know your clients to a certain point. But yeah, we have come to the end. Guy, any last words?
No, just thanks for having me on again. It's been really enjoyable.
Yeah,
you're part of the furniture guy, you know that.
I recommend Chris's blog as well as his music. So,
yes, definitely. And Chris has volunteered himself with Matt, our wonderful Matt, to write and produce a solution-focused song to raise money for family-based solutions. And we are asking other solution-focused practitioners to get involved, please contact Chris or Matt via any means to please get involved, whether it be singing or writing or whatever it might be. Chris knows far better than I do. But Chris, basically, I heard your song, Chris, and I was like, I need to talk to this man.
Yeah.
And I said,
yeah,
congratulations.
Yeah,
I said, congratulations, Chris. You're writing a song with Matt.
yeah. Well, basically, so it's kind of, I think the nearest parallel would be like I'm being like Bob Geldof and he's being Midge, and we're doing like Live Aid. No, we're not.
Yeah.
We're just doing the single. What's the Do They Know It's Christmas? We're not doing the whole thing at Wembley Stadium. We're just doing this one. But yeah, anyone's welcome to join in with it. You need to be a social focused practitioner.
You can get your famous mate to come and sing with you then.
No.
Two of them, Guy. Two of them.
No, one really. Yeah, one
Oh, is
really.
it one? Well, yeah, the other, yeah. I mean, Guy doesn't know it yet, but he's involved in this, whatever you guys are doing that I have no idea about. And Guy knows anything to do with FBS and music and mentoring. Guy is the guy we go to. We love him. He's always there, and yeah, he's one of the guys that I will just call and text and say, "Guy, help!" And we'll come to the point now that he's going to answer the phone to say, "Now what?"
Stop stalking me, he's going to say.
Yeah. See you in the follow-up session, Guy. Yeah, but Chris, we really do thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It's been such an amazing FBS chat, and I have genuinely learned quite a bit. So thank you for that.
And I mean, I've just been burbling on for an hour, but then that's what I usually do.
No, that's good. That's our point.
Very
Good.
useful. Very useful burbling.
Yeah,
Good.
very useful burbling.
I'll
But
keep doing that,
yeah,
I'll do more of it.
Look forward to hopefully a single coming out soon with Guy.
It's going to coincide with the start of SF24 on August the 5th.
Yes, we're aiming.
So,
we're aiming.
So anyone who's at all musical or would like to be involved, just get in touch with FBS or with me probably on Facebook or email if you've got either of our emails, and just say I'd like to be involved, and I'll send it. Anyone who expresses an interest, I'm going to be sending them an email next week with the basic song which I'm recording this week attached, and then.
Wow.
Yeah, and then you can contribute. It will be you can sing along to this, and then
The funny thing is, I forgot to tell Joe about this, Chris. So he's only finding out for the first.
Okay, yeah. The phone is fine. You can just sing into your phone. Whatever. It's kind of like you don't need to be put off by technology. If you want to be in the next Do They Know It's Christmas? I can't remember live, whatever it is. But it's not. It's a solution focused themed song, which is going to be raising money for FBS.
Brilliant. And I do have a very good voice.
You do have a good voice.
Even if I say so myself.
My voice complements your voice.
It does. Yeah.
It so doesn't. But yeah, thank you, everyone. Do a harmony then. So next week we have the beautiful Anne-Marie Wolf joining us next Wednesday. So tune in at 7 p.m. for that. Guys, can you just stay there for a couple of minutes so we can say thank you and find out who that famous person is? And to the rest of you,
I'll put it on Facebook.
We'll put it on Facebook.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to tell you.